What happens when a royal guest mistakes a morning television set for her own personal throne room? In just 34 seconds, one loaded question would transform a routine interview into the most explosive exit in daytime television history. The studio lights were blazing bright that morning. Susanna Reid sat poised behind the Good Morning Britain desk, her notes carefully arranged, her demeanor calm and professional. Across from her sat Meghan Markle, dressed immaculately, radiating an air of supreme confidence that would soon turn into something far more volatile. The interview had started pleasantly enough. Susanna opened with warm pleasantries, welcoming her guest with genuine enthusiasm. But beneath the surface politeness, tension was already beginning to simmer. Meghan had arrived with an agenda, and it was becoming increasingly clear that she expected the conversation to follow her script, not the host's. "Thank you so much for joining us this morning," Susanna began, her smile warm and inviting. "I know our viewers are eager to hear your thoughts on several important topics." Meghan nodded, but there was something guarded in her expression, something that suggested she was already preparing for battle rather than conversation. The first few questions went smoothly. Susanna asked about charitable work, about recent projects, about adjusting to public life. Meghan answered each question with practiced precision, her responses polished and rehearsed. But then Susanna did what any good journalist would do. She asked a real question, one that required more than a prepared soundbite. "There's been quite a bit of discussion lately about some of the choices you've made regarding privacy versus public engagement," Susanna said, her tone respectful but direct. "Some people have pointed out what they see as inconsistencies. How would you respond to those concerns?" The shift in Meghan's expression was immediate. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed. The carefully maintained facade of gracious guest began to crack. "I think that's a rather unfair characterization," Meghan replied, her voice taking on an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "People don't understand the complexities of the situation." Susanna maintained her professional composure. "I'm simply asking you to help them understand. That's what we're here for, isn't it? To have an open conversation?" "An open conversation?" Meghan's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Is that what you call this? Ambushing me with loaded questions designed to make me look bad?" The crew members exchanged glances. This was escalating faster than anyone had anticipated. Susanna, however, remained unshaken. "I can assure you, there's no ambush here," Susanna said calmly. "These are questions that many people have been asking. As a public figure who has chosen to speak out on various issues, surely you understand that people will want to discuss those choices." "Chosen to speak out?" Meghan's voice rose slightly. "I've been forced to defend myself against constant attacks and misrepresentations. And now you're sitting here acting like you're some neutral party when your show has been part of the problem." Susanna's eyebrows raised slightly, but her voice remained steady and measured. "I think that's unfair. We've covered your story from multiple angles, including many sympathetic perspectives. Journalism means asking difficult questions sometimes. It doesn't mean we're attacking you." But Meghan wasn't listening anymore. She was gathering steam, her composure unraveling with each passing second. "You have no idea what it's like," she continued, leaning forward in her seat. "Sitting here in your comfortable studio, playing journalist, pretending to care about the truth when all you really want is drama and ratings." The accusation hung in the air like a grenade. Susanna blinked, taking a moment to process what had just been said. When she responded, her voice was firmer, though still professional. "I take my role as a journalist very seriously," Susanna said, "and I think it's quite inappropriate for you to suggest otherwise. I've built my career on integrity and fair reporting. I won't apologize for asking questions that the public wants answered." "The public?" Meghan scoffed. "You mean the tabloid reading mob that you all feed with your constant speculation and invasion of privacy?" "I've never worked for a tabloid," Susanna corrected, her patience clearly being tested. and I think you're conflating very different types of media. We're having a televised interview that you agreed to participate in. No one forced you to be here." That last statement seemed to light a fuse. Meghan's face flushed with anger. "How dare you?" she said, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you sit there and lecture me about what I agreed to? You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under, what kind of impossible situation I'm navigating every single day." Susanna leaned back slightly, giving her guest space, but not backing down. "I'm not lecturing you. I'm simply pointing out that this is a voluntary interview. If you're uncomfortable with the questions, we can certainly move on to other topics. But I won't accept being accused of ambushing you or lacking integrity." "Oh, you won't accept it?" Meghan's tone was dripping with sarcasm now. "Well, forgive me for not caring what you will or won't accept. You're just another cog in the machine that has been trying to tear me down from day one." The studio had gone completely silent except for their voices. Camera operators stood frozen. Producers watched from the control room with mounting alarm. This was live television, and it was going off the rails spectacularly. Susanna took a deep breath, clearly trying to de-escalate the situation. "I understand you're feeling defensive, but I really think you're misdirecting your frustration here. I'm not your enemy. I'm just trying to have a conversation." "A conversation?" Meghan practically spat the word. "This isn't a conversation. This is an interrogation. And I'm done being interrogated by people like you, who think they have the right to pick apart every decision I make." "People like me?" Susanna's voice finally showed a hint of her own frustration. "What exactly does that mean?" Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "It means people who have never walked in my shoes, who have never faced the kind of scrutiny and hatred that I face daily, but who feel perfectly entitled to judge me from their privileged little perches." The irony of a duchess calling a working journalist privileged was not lost on anyone in the studio, but Susanna chose not to point it out. Instead, she remained seated, looking up at her now standing guest with remarkable composure. "I think you need to take a moment and calm down," Susanna said quietly. "We can take a break if you need one." "I don't need anything from you," Meghan shot back. "What I need is for people like you to show some basic human decency and respect." "I have shown you nothing but respect since you arrived," Susanna countered, her voice firm. "You're the one who has turned this into a confrontation. You're the one hurling accusations and insults." "Because you pushed me to it." Meghan's voice was loud now, echoing through the studio. "With your snide questions and your fake concern and your barely concealed agenda." Susanna stood up now too, matching her guest's energy, but not her hostility. "I have no agenda except to do my job. And frankly, your behavior right now is incredibly unprofessional. You're a guest on this show, and you're acting like we've somehow wronged you by asking basic interview questions." "Basic questions?" Meghan laughed harshly. "You call those basic questions? You were trying to trap me, to make me say something you could twist and use against me later." "That's absolutely not true," Susanna said, her voice rising slightly for the first time. "And I think deep down, you know that. You came here expecting a fight, and you're determined to have one, regardless of what I actually say or ask." The accusation clearly struck a nerve. Meghan's face contorted with rage. "You don't know anything about me or what I expected," she said, her voice shaking. "All you know is what you've read in your trashy newspapers and gossip columns. You've already made up your mind about who I am, and nothing I say here will change that." "Then why did you agree to come?" Susanna asked, genuinely confused now. "If you think we're all so terrible and biased, why subject yourself to this?" It was a fair question, a logical question, but Meghan seemed to have moved beyond logic. She grabbed her bag from beside her chair, her movements sharp and aggressive. "This was clearly a mistake," she declared. "I should have known better than to expect fair treatment from this show, from this network, from any of you." Susanna held out a hand, a gesture of peace. "Please, let's just take a breath here. We can start over. Talk about something else entirely, if you prefer." But Meghan was already moving toward the edge of the set, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. "I'm not interested in starting over with you," she said over her shoulder. "I'm not interested in being your morning entertainment, your ratings boost, your controversial headline of the day." "That's not what this was ever about," Susanna called after her, still trying to salvage something from the wreckage. "We invited you here in good faith." Meghan spun around one last time, her eyes blazing. "Good faith? You wouldn't know good faith if it hit you in the face. You're all the same. You pretend to be fair, to be balanced, but really, you just want to see people like me fail. You want to tear us down because it makes you feel better about your own mediocre lives." The insult was so shocking, so over the line, that even the seasoned crew members gasped audibly. Susanna's face showed genuine hurt for just a moment before her professional mask snapped back into place. "I think you should leave," Susanna said quietly, but with unmistakable authority. "If that's truly what you think of us, of me, then there's no point in continuing this conversation." "Oh, don't worry," Meghan said venomously. "I'm already gone. Enjoy your little show. Enjoy talking about me to your audience of people who have nothing better to do than judge strangers. I hope it makes you all feel very important." She turned toward the exit, then paused, unable to resist one final parting shot. "And for the record," she added, "this will be the last time I make the mistake of giving any of you the time of day. You can all keep talking about me, speculating about me, making up stories about me, but you'll have to do it without me participating in your circus." Susanna watched her go, her expression unreadable. When Meghan finally disappeared through the studio doors, letting them slam behind her with a resounding bang, Susanna slowly sat back down at the desk. The cameras were still rolling. The show was still live. Millions of people had just witnessed the entire meltdown. For a long moment, Susanna said nothing. She straightened her notes, took a sip of water, and gathered herself. When she finally looked back at the camera, her composure was remarkable, considering what had just transpired. "Well," she said with a slight sad smile, "that certainly didn't go as planned. I want to be very clear with our viewers. We invited our guest here today, hoping to have a constructive conversation. We prepared thoughtful questions. We had no intention of ambushing anyone or creating drama." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes, despite our best efforts, interviews don't work out. People come with their own baggage, their own expectations, their own frustrations, and sometimes those things bubble over in ways that are unfortunate for everyone involved." Susanna glanced down at her notes, then back at the camera. "I won't respond in kind to the personal attacks that were made against me and my colleagues. That's not who I am or what this show is about. We're professionals. We do our jobs with integrity, and we'll continue to do so." The control room was still in chaos, producers scrambling to figure out how to proceed with the rest of the show. But Susanna remained calm, a steady presence in the storm. "I think what we all witnessed just now speaks for itself," she continued. "Our viewers are smart enough to draw their own conclusions about what happened and why. I don't need to editorialize or explain. The footage speaks louder than anything I could say." She straightened in her chair, her professionalism never wavering, despite the emotional toll the confrontation had clearly taken. "We're going to take a short break," Susanna announced. "When we come back, we'll move on to our other scheduled segments. Thank you all for your patience and understanding during that unexpected moment." As the show cut to commercial, Susanna finally allowed herself to exhale fully. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her face remained composed. A producer rushed over to check on her, but she waved them off with a reassuring smile. "I'm fine," she assured them. "Truly. Let's just get through the rest of the show." But even as she said it, she knew that this moment would define the morning. It would be clipped, shared, discussed, analyzed endlessly. The confrontation would be replayed thousands of times across social media and news programs around the world. What had started as a routine interview had become something else entirely. A moment where entitlement met accountability, where someone used to controlling their narrative crashed headlong into a journalist who refused to be bullied or intimidated, where the mask of victimhood slipped to reveal something far less sympathetic underneath. The empty chair across from Susanna seemed to tell its own story. A story about what happens when someone expects deference rather than dialogue, about what happens when challenging questions are met with explosive defensiveness rather than thoughtful answers, about what happens when a guest mistakes a television interview for a coronation. Susanna looked at that empty chair and felt a mix of emotions. Disappointment that the interview had gone so wrong, frustration at being attacked for simply doing her job, but also a strange sense of clarity. She had handled herself with dignity and professionalism throughout the entire ordeal. She had remained calm when others lost their composure. She had asked fair questions and received unfair abuse in return. The show came back from commercial break, and Susanna seamlessly transitioned into the next segment as if nothing unusual had happened. It was a masterclass in broadcasting under pressure. While her guest had stormed off in a fury, Susanna carried on with grace. In those few minutes of chaos and confrontation, a stark contrast had been drawn between someone who viewed questions as attacks and someone who understood that scrutiny is part of public life, between someone who demanded special treatment and someone who treated everyone equally, between someone who played the victim and someone who refused to be victimized. The cameras kept rolling. The show went on. And Susanna Reid proved once again why she was one of the most respected voices in British broadcasting. Not because she avoided difficult moments, but because she handled them with a professionalism and integrity that no amount of royal titles or celebrity status could match. The empty chair remained a powerful image, a symbol of what happens when entitlement meets reality. When someone so used to having their way encounters a journalist who won't simply nod along and agree. When the expectation of preferential treatment collides with the reality of fair but firm questioning. Susanna finished the show with her usual warmth and professionalism. She thanked the viewers, previewed the next day's segments, and signed off with a smile. Only when the cameras finally stopped rolling did she allow herself a moment of private reflection on the morning's extraordinary events. She had done nothing wrong. She had asked legitimate questions in a respectful manner. She had maintained her composure in the face of escalating hostility. She had refused to be bullied or intimidated. And she had shown millions of viewers what real professionalism looks like under pressure. The aftermath would be intense. The clips would go viral. The think pieces would be written. The debates would rage. But Susanna knew that when people watched the footage, they would see exactly what had happened. They would see a host trying to do her job and a guest who couldn't handle basic interview questions without having a complete meltdown. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. One person had behaved with dignity and grace. The other had revealed a sense of entitlement so profound that even polite questioning was treated as a personal attack. One person understood that with great privilege comes great responsibility, including the responsibility to answer questions from the press. The other believed that privilege should shield them from all scrutiny. As Susanna left the studio that morning, she held her head high. She had nothing to apologize for, nothing to regret. She had done her job exactly as she should have. And if her guest couldn't handle that, well, that said far more about the guest than it did about her. The empty chair told the whole story. Sometimes people storm off when they can't control the narrative. Sometimes they lash out when they're asked to be accountable. Sometimes they mistake honest journalism for personal persecution. And sometimes the most powerful response is simply to maintain your dignity and let their behavior speak for itself. Susanna Reid had done exactly that. And in doing so, she had shown why true professionalism will always triumph over entitled tantrums, no matter how